I'm your host, Millen, and today my guest is Mary Bernotas. And she is a student at Eastern University who competes in track and field right now. She played a big role in helping the Eastern women's track and field team win the championship back in 2020. And she is also a double major in mathematics and education. So, Mary, I noticed on your social media profile that you put the verse 1 Timothy 4:12, which stated, "Don't let anyone look down on you because you are young, but set an example for the believers in speech and conduct and love and faith and in purity." So, in seeing this right now, how do you think that Christians can set a godlike example if sinful nature is perpetuated across all humans and it's within us? Christians or not Christian?
Great question. So obviously we are all very sinful, myself very much included, definitely sin on a daily basis. But I do definitely try to set an example by the way I live. So that verse, actually, I had just picked it today to be my life verse, which is a thing that my church does every year. So it's really funny that you brought that up, because it's still pretty fresh. But the past few years since I've been in college, and especially the past few months, I've really been trying to focus on living my life in a way that reflects how God would want us to live. So I've just been trying to focus on that through just different aspects of my life, and specifically like the ones that you listed, like showing my faithfulness, like just being more vocal about my faith, sharing it with my friends when I can, but trying to not do so in any sort of a pushy way, because Jesus was a gentleman. Like, he tried to not force himself on anyone. So I try to not do the same, or I try to do what he did. But yeah, it definitely is more of a challenge with the fact that we're all sinners, because then it seems like you're being a hypocrite, which, like, in many ways, like, I am a hypocrite, because I do, like, preach, like, oh, okay, well, it's not good to do this, that, the other thing, but then I end up doing that, like, just like little things like gossiping, which doesn't seem like a big deal, but it can be really harmful, of course. So things like that, like, yes, I try to, like, express to people, like, oh, that's not good, like, we shouldn't do that, but then I see myself slipping into that constantly. So I think just more, it can be helpful to express to people, like, hey, like, I know that, like, I'm telling you, like, hey, we shouldn't do that, and, like, I don't mean to call you out on it in a mean way, because I do it myself, but we shouldn't do it, and just kind of bringing attention to the fact that you also do it, different things that you're, like, trying to or tell people that you shouldn't be doing, I think can be helpful for Christians.
Yeah, those are all good points, because from what I see, the common stereotype is that a lot of Christians, like, say one thing and don't do another thing also. Yeah. So I'd like you to speak on that. Like, how can people bring up the faith in a way that isn't pushy? Because a lot of times when I'm with friends or something, especially surface level friends that don't have, like, philosophical discussions or, like, religious discussions, how would you really bring that up when, especially with the team aspect, because I know you started a Bible study, or at least back last semester.
Yeah.
So, well, going into that, I'll just dive in right there. What was your purpose in starting the Bible study outside of religion, really? Like, just, like, discussing religion? Why did you start that? Why did you launch that?
Definitely just to try to connect our team more on a level that was more than surface level, for sure. And to build a community, because I didn't feel like we have had that in, like, when Mike was here, I felt like we did, our past coach. But in, like, the more recent, like, year and a half, I feel like that's kind of fallen through the cracks. And I think the Bible study that we had freshman year, like, I think that helped. And not that the whole team came or anything, but the people that did come, like, you really saw a different side of them that you wouldn't have seen before. And you kind of thought about them in, like, a different light, or, like, even just thought about them more and, like, could pray for them more. And I was just really hoping that like that would kind of grow and become a thing on our team. So at least kids had an option to like go and talk to people on our team in like more than just a surface level way. And I just thought it would help too, like, so that the people on our team could be more of leaders as opposed to just,
right,
you know, like not as engaged with everyone else, especially the freshmen. I thought it would be helpful for them too, like for them that are Christians, it could be good for them to like know, hey, I can go talk to like Doug Kramer, our captain, about religious stuff and not just about running.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I remember even back in, I think it was freshman year when they first started, a lot of I believe it forced some captains, like juniors and seniors then, to come, because I know one person like didn't want to come, and then he decided to, and it's definitely a powerful thing, because it does open up people to experience more, hear the other side more, and tap into something that isn't really discussed too much, I would say.
Yeah.
Like especially with like guys, I would say, because the data shows that like women are more religious as a whole than men are.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Did not know that.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, yeah. Well, do you have any idea why that is? I'm curious. Like, and there's no like right or wrong answer. There's no right or wrong answer for that. I'm just curious. Like, what do you believe that is? Like, why do you think that is? 'Cause that has been the trend for a while, not just like a 1 year deal.
I don't know. That's like the first place my mind went when you said that. Like, why is that? Maybe you kind of touched on it a little bit. Like, maybe because like we talk just more in general, and like we're okay with sharing our feelings more. So that could be it. I know that like on our runs, like we haven't had too many like religious conversations at all, because not everyone on our team is a believer, so like we don't want to make anyone uncomfortable or anything, but we've definitely had like a few, and it's definitely come up. Like we don't like shy away from it too much. Like if it's naturally brought up, we're fine talking about it. I don't know, if it comes up around guys, like is it usually just kind of like awkward and like shut down, or is it like, oh, let's have a discussion about it?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I would say, from what I've seen, I've only had a select few of friends that really I'd be able to talk about like Christianity with, because I know they're Christians and they brought it up, and the 3 of us or 4 of us would really agree easily to talk about it. But if there's a mixed group of people that either maybe on the team or like are not a believer, it's definitely a tension that a lot of people don't want to break, and not a lot of people don't want to discover. So I think regarding that, a lot of men don't really, I guess, overtly express their feelings like women do. So maybe inwardly, I don't know, maybe inwardly they believe in other things. I'm not really sure either.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. So, but one thing I looked into a little bit is I want to get your opinion on soulmates.
Okay.
What are your thoughts on that? Is there a religious context to it? Is there or is it more of an idealistic type of idea? Or what do you think about that? What's
I
your
like
opinion?
this question. So when I was younger, I like always used to believe in soulmates. I was like really like die hard about it. I was like, yeah, like there's definitely like one person for everyone. And then like as I grew up, I was like, okay, that's not exactly realistic. Like there's divorce all the time. There's like remarriage and everything. There's like death of a spouse. Yeah. So like then it's like, oh well, that puts a lot of holes in that. And then I talked to a Young Life leader of mine. Like Young Life is like a
Right, it's like a Christian organization,
yes,
right?
Yes, Christian
Some
organization,
sort?
exactly. So I talked to a leader there, and she said that she didn't believe in soulmates, and she was about to get married and stuff. So she, but she loved her husband, or her fiance at the time. It wasn't anything like that. Yeah.
Right.
But I just thought it was interesting that she didn't believe in it, and she's very devout Christian. So I was like, oh, what are your thoughts on it? She was just like, well, I just think that like Christians could like essentially get along with like any number of Christians. Like there's like it's not just like there's one set person and like that's like the one person for you. so I said back to that, because this really rocked my world. I was like, but
before you go on, how old were you when this happened? When you were speaking to her about, like, what age group was this? Like before you were
this is
adolescent?
high school. It was like young high school, like freshman, sophomore year.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I think, yeah, about that age. And so, sorry.
You said she was telling you about it as a devout Christian. She was telling you, and then you were rocked. That's the last thing you said.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, don't you believe that Mark, her now husband, don't you believe that he is the one person for you, like that God chose for you to marry? Because, she's not planning on getting remarried or anything necessarily. Like, she's hoping to spend the rest of her life with him.
Right.
And she was like, oh, well, yeah, like, I do believe that. And then, so her beliefs, I don't know how much they changed at all, but mine kind of did in the way that I thought, like, okay, maybe there's not just one singular person for everyone, depending on who you are, but I do believe that who we end up with is, like, it's all in God's plan. So, like, for someone like me, like, my plan is to only have one husband because, like, I don't want to get divorced. But say he were to die, then, like, yes, like, I would hope to probably remarry depending on my age or whatever. So in that case, like, yes, I could see, like, that's not just one soulmate, like, that's multiple soulmates.
Right.
But I do believe that we end up with the person that we're supposed to be with.
Okay. It's interesting because in the biblical context, it would say, like, people are sort of free from the bondages of marriage when their spouse passes away. Then they're free to marry. But let me read this one. There's one verse I found. So this is from 1 Corinthians 7, 8-9. It said, "Now to the unmarried and the widows I say, it is good for them to stay unmarried, as I am. But if they cannot control themselves, they should marry, for it is better to marry than to burn with passion." So that was really fascinating because that part of the Bible, I don't really, I would say in the church, they don't talk about much. Excuse me, let's drink some water. Let's get a little. So I've noticed they don't talk about celibacy much, which obviously it's not as realistic in today's culture, of course, in today's world. But did you really hear about this idea in the Bible though, or no? Because I was kind of surprised when I read it, like when I was a little bit younger.
This idea being like,
that, like, it's better. It's almost like best to not be married. Like to remain in a celibate kind of nature. Like what are your thoughts on that? Did you hear that idea before or no?
Not really. Well, I grew up in the Catholic Church and the priests aren't married.
Right.
And like that was just kind of like at the time, like I was like, oh, okay, like it makes some sense, like because you're devoting yourself to God and God alone. But to me, it always just seemed like, oh, that seems awful though. Like I would not want to be unmarried. But I don't know, because then, like, I was really surprised that pastors were allowed to be married and stuff. Like, in, like, Protestant religions and such, they're allowed to have wives. And I don't know what if that makes a huge difference or not, if that causes them to sin, well, I don't want to say less, but I guess just in different ways. Yeah.
Well, and that's one thing, because it's really like some of the crimes that some popes have done is like really awful, and some people would contribute that and say maybe they should be allowed to marry in that regard. But that, I can go down that rabbit hole. I'm not really sure. That's just one thing I wanted to mention.
No, that's a good point though. Like, and it literally says like if you can't control your passions, like get married. So,
and even I think. In one part of the Bible, I don't remember where, it was saying something like a good wife comes from the Lord or something like that. So it's a little bit contradictory, I think, because here it would say like it's almost like a last resort. It seems like in this context, like if you can't control yourself, then get married. But then that would say a good wife's from the Lord. So that kind of boggles my head a little bit.
Well, okay, but like the beginning of the verse, can you read like the first part again?
Yeah. Now to the unmarried and the widows, I say, it is good for them to stay unmarried, as I am.
I don't know. To me, like, when you first read it to me, it kind of came off as, like, not just anyone who's unmarried, if that makes sense. Like, I don't know. I guess the way I took it was, like, later in life. Because, you know, like, around Jesus' time, like, they got married young. So I guess maybe it's, like, it could mean unmarried in the sense that, like, you at this time, you're, like, in your 30s, 40s. Yeah.
That's true.
And it's, like, okay, like, you're unmarried, like, you're gonna die in, like, however many years, like, maybe don't even bother unless you can't control yourself. And I don't know, so I guess that's just how I took it, but that could totally be a wrong interpretation.
That makes sense, actually, with the widow's part. That does seem like that could be a possible interpretation. So, yeah, that's a good point. So, I want to hear your thoughts on this regarding feminism.
Okay.
Because, let me think here. Do you believe that feminism and the Christian religion do you believe they can be compatible together?
I guess it depends on, like, which version of feminism you're looking at and, like, how extreme it is. I'd say, like, the more extreme or even, like, the more, like, baseline feminism, no. But, like, a more dulled down version, I would think yes. The Bible does, like, at least in the Old Testament, like, it does, like, kind of almost, like, put down women in at some points. It makes it seem, like, at least to us, it looks like it's putting down women. It makes it seem like, oh, she was just, like, the caretaker of the home, and, like, the men could just, like, boss them around or, like, sell them and just, like, give them away, like, whenever they wanted. Like, they were just owned. But that was, like, the culture of the time. And not to say that we should just change when the culture changes, like, not that we should change our beliefs when the culture changes, but I do think that, like, as the culture progresses, that it's, like, we shouldn't be forcing women, like, back down just based off of, like, just, like, some of the Old Testament, like, how, like, the men treated the women, because that was just, like, in the time, like, that was just how, like, they were treated. And also in the Bible, like, it shows, like, women being given prominent, like, places in the Bible, like, even just, like, Jesus at the well, like, speaking to, like, the woman, like, that was just a big deal in and of itself. Like, so I definitely think that, like, there are times where, like, Jesus or God through the Bible tried to show, like, women are important, like, even though we don't, like, some of the stories, like, they don't make it that obvious or, like, seem contradictory. There are definitely, like, aspects and places in the Bible where, like, women are shown as, like, just as valuable, just as equal. So, and I do think that, like, men and women are equal, like, and I do think that the Bible preaches that. But I also think that, like, they are better suited for certain callings. Like,
please dive into that.
Okay.
I'm curious what you mean by that.
Like, I personally have the desire to, when I have kids, like, stay home with them for their first couple years of life and take care of them. And I wouldn't expect my husband to want to do that as much. I'd expect him to want to go out and, like, work and have a job. And I'm totally fine with that. I know some women aren't, and I know our culture especially is, like, pushing that to be like, oh, well, that's, like, almost bad, especially, like, if women, like, that, if, like, that's what they want to do, like, you're looked down upon now, whereas before, like, that's, like, what you were expected to do. You were looked down upon if you didn't do that. So, and I just don't think that's necessarily fair. Like, that's, like, part of our nature. Like, that is, like, in us women, like, to want to be that caretaker. And maybe not, like, maybe there are some women that, like, are exceptions, or, like, they don't quite have that exact calling, because, like, there are some women, like, who just won't have kids at any point, or who won't get married at any point, and that's fine. Like, I'm not saying, or I don't believe that, like, every woman should just have kids and stay home and take care of them, because that's not realistic or fair necessarily. But I do think that, like, men are definitely more suited for those, like, more, to just even have a job, but especially, like, just, like, the more, I don't know, rugged jobs too. Like, you don't see a lot of women, like, being, like, lumberjacks, and
Right.
there's a reason for that.
Right.
We're not quite exactly built for it, all of us, anyway, the majority of us, compared to men.
Yeah, it's funny you said that. I think I saw something, it showed the top 20 jobs that I think women are least in.
Oh.
And of course there's things like that,
Okay.
like very like rugged kind of jobs. But when I see feminism, especially in a college place, and I think the majority of women would also, from what I've seen, the majority of women kind of agree with that sort of idea, is that a lot of them would say, like, they want to almost wait, they want to postpone their I know, but I don't want to call it like mating years, I guess, but that's the first
I
thing.
know what you mean.
That's the first thing I think of,
Gotcha.
like marriage and all that, so that they can find a job and all those things. That's what feminism, to me, that's what it seems like it's pushing, a career-oriented approach, a career-oriented mindset first, and then marriage mindset. Now, in my belief, I think that for men, that almost makes more sense than women, because it seems like for women, women go through much different things than having children than men do, obviously. So I think men can almost, it could be okay for men to be older. I mean, the oldest person I think that had a kid was like 80 years old or something. I saw it in the textbook like forever ago.
Crazy.
Yeah. So I would say, do you believe that feminism is more so pushed to young women, like people like you, in the education sphere? Because I know you're going to be you'd like to be a teacher, I believe, unless that's changed. So, not saying you're going to be a history teacher in that, because I didn't even do math, but do you believe that's being very forcefully on women, or or how do you interpret how colleges are, at least at Eastern, where you are now?
Oh, okay. That's like kind of, I don't know, I guess that's kind of hard, because like I do think it is to an extent, but I don't think we realize it as much. Like, we're kind of just growing up with it, and like we're like on social media, it's just like such a big thing, like in like all these like movies and shows, it's just like the thing. So like it doesn't seem like it's being pushed on us, but yes, I do think it is, in very subtle ways, which kind of makes it even like weirder and almost like scarier. So yes, I do think it's being pushed on us, but I think in like growing up, going to church, and like continuing going to church, like I have that double side, that other side of the coin, where like I see like a lot of young Christians like getting married and like starting families right away, and I'm like, oh, okay, like to other people like that seems weird, but to me like that seems like something I'd want. So yes, but to answer your question, I think it is being pushed on us to an extent. We just don't see it as often, or see it like that.
Right. I agree. Especially, I mean, you look at the industry, like movies. I mean, you can go internet, movies, like social media, like you were saying. So this is what, because I've seen this too with some women that are on campus. Even my friend would say, for example, someone that grew up in a, I wouldn't say conservative, but more like Christian-centered, Christian value kind of home. And if they go to university, and then all of a sudden, like a lot of those viewpoints change. Well, this person, at least with this person specifically, a lot of viewpoints and values are changed. So, assuming you would have children in the United States, would you be afraid of values like that changing, or do you think your children should have the independent autonomy to make those decisions for themselves?
I don't think I would let them too much. Well, I would try to raise them in a way where they would think that like the biblical teachings are the right teachings, meaning in the sense that like women are created for certain things, men are created for certain things, and like if say I have 3 daughters and one of them doesn't want to get married or doesn't want to have kids, like I'm not going to try to force that on her, but I will try to just like show them, teach them, raise them up knowing the Bible, because I want it to be their choice. So I won't like try to force it too much, I don't think, or at least that's my goal, to not force it too much. But I definitely want to try to raise them up and keep them grounded in that. So like keep them going to the church, like, or if they don't like the church that we're at, like help them to find another one or something. Because I think that's why a lot of people's views change, especially when they get to college, is because like they don't have that foundation anymore, like they're not home, and like maybe their religion was just something they did for their parents or with their parents, and like now that they're on their own, they're like, I don't care for it as much anymore.
Right.
I want to go do my own thing. They were holding me back. Like I want to try to let my kids know, like, hey, like this is your choice. Like I'm not trying to force it, but on the other hand, believe this.
That's fascinating you said that, because, well, of course, I mean, I remember when I was in youth group back in high school, they were saying that I think like a third of the room, I don't know the statistic exactly, but a huge part of the room would not be following Christianity as much anymore. Like that, a lot of people are not practicing after high school, meaning like when they become a young adult. At the same time, though, I've seen people that, some friends of mine, they've been raised very strictly, and they go to Catholic schools all throughout high school, and they're almost like they're almost like dying to leave the church almost, because like I know one guy, like he would go to church like or at 6 a.m. or something like that. It was very strict, like very strict Catholic church. So I'm curious, do you think that a strict upraising like that would deter children almost? Because from what I've seen, sometimes it does. So what do you think about that?
So funny that you bring this up too, because I was raised Catholic. So, and I've kind of seen that like with my like family and just like with people I grew up around, like it can really go either way. And like, so yeah, like a strict upbringing, especially in the Catholic Church, which I've now since I like left and moved to Protestant churches, but it can be a big deterrent because it doesn't focus on relationship with God. Like it just focuses on religion and the rules. At least like that's how it was presented to me. And I've been to like a number of Catholic churches, and that's how it was always presented. And I just don't think it's giving the whole picture, or it's giving the part that, like the connection part. Like it's kind of just like, here, follow these rules, come here to be taught, we'll teach you everything you need to know. It doesn't really push like, oh, here's the Bible, read it for your own, like make up your own mind about it, which I think is a really important part. And then and they just don't even make it that interesting, I guess, per se, like the church services, and not that like church should just be an entertainment thing for us, of course, right. But like if you're like 13 and being forced to like go for an hour every single week, you're like, well, this is boring. Like it's literally the same thing every week. Like why would I want to go? And then so yes, by the time like you get to an age where like you're not being forced to go, like they can't force you to go anymore, like yeah, if you don't feel any connection to it, why would you want to stay? But then, of course, you do have the people like who were actually touched by the Holy Spirit while being in the Catholic Church. So, like, then they stay with it, or maybe just to please their parents, they stay with it or whatever. But I definitely think that's different in Protestant religions, because they teach more like, here, read the Bible. Like, we want you to make up your own mind, and like we'll try to help you along the way with like the beliefs that our church believes. Or like understanding scripture and such, but they don't just like force the rules necessarily. They're more like form a relationship with God, talk to him daily, like we'll try to help you in practical ways.
Yeah, that's a very good explanation. So I would counter with like, how would, like, you were formerly Catholic, how would you really see the Protestant faith, or that portion, that branch? Like would different family members introduce you to that, or did you find that through different like families or friends?
Protestant religions.
Yeah.
So I found that through Young Life.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
which is like we mentioned
That makes
before,
sense.
like the Christian organization, and they don't have like they're non-denominational, like they're just Christian. So like I was Catholic when I was introduced to the whole organization because I had started at public school. I'd been in Catholic school up until 8th grade, and so I was like,
Okay.
yeah. So in high school, I was like, oh, like let me look for like a good like place to like
A religious organization.
yeah,
Yeah, that
because
makes
it was
sense.
like I'm at public school.
Right.
And it was just a whole nother side of like faith that I had never seen before. And I was like, to one of my leaders, I was like, what is this? Like, what denomination, I guess? I didn't even know how to ask the question. She was just like, well, we're just like accepting of like everything, really. Like, we just had these like core beliefs. Jesus was a person, died, rose again, all that. And I was just like, wow, like that's what I believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting because I know I was never a Catholic, so I mean I can only briefly say some things from what I've observed, but there's some very different things that Catholics do. Like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Like, they definitely follow Mary in some sort of way, right?
Yeah, they like idolize her.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm curious if there was some pretty contrasting ideas between Young Life and that idea, that upbringing. How did you really make that transition more smoothly? Because obviously, yes, Jesus is the Lord in both Catholics and Protestants, but there was definitely there's some differences, I would say, especially with my uncle being a deacon in Catholic church.
Oh, okay. That's
yeah.
cool.
So he knows. I had to discuss with him a lot more.
Sure.
But yeah. So what really made that transition more simple? Because there's definitely some ideological differences there.
Yeah. So yeah, like you said, like they definitely focus in on like Mary, saints, and like they just put a lot of, like I said, focus on them, like they pray to them and stuff. And like I thought that was all fine, and like not to say that that's wrong, but Young Life never said like any of that was wrong. So I think that really helped. Like they never pushed like, oh, Catholicism is wrong. Like they never gave me that idea. I kind of came to somewhat of an idea like that on my own because I just kept looking back at the Catholic faith and like everything I'd been taught when I was younger, and then compared it to everything I was learning now, and I was like, I don't know that I really believe that. Like I don't know why I believe things like that. Like confession. In the Catholic Church, like you go to a priest and you confess your sins, and that's like as often I guess as you want to go. But like then I like was reading the Bible and like learning that I could just do it myself, and that's at least in some parts of the Bible like what we are like called to do, and like totally acceptable. And I don't think that going to confessional in the Catholic Church is wrong. Like if that's what you want to do and if that's what you feel is right and that's what you need to do, totally fine. Like all you. I just had never really felt like I got much from it. So I was like, well, this is an even closer option to God, so why wouldn't I take it? So I guess I had just kind of seen things like in the Protestant religion that made a lot more sense to me, that were a lot more biblically based, that I like looked over at the Catholic religion and I was like, well, why are we even doing that? Like it never made much sense to me. I kind of just did it because that's how I was raised. So it's a lot more just like my own religion, I guess, like Protestant religions in
So
general.
do Catholics have a different book than the Bible that they use or no? Because I've heard that, but I don't know if that's true or not.
So it's not like, so it's still the Bible,
Okay.
but apparently I didn't learn this till I was like in high school either. Apparently they just like have more books in it that like the Protestant religions don't, which I just thought was crazy. Like,
Interesting.
yeah, like who decided that type of thing? That just kind of blew my mind. So maybe that's like where some of more of their like beliefs and traditions come in. But I was just kind of mind blown that like most don't use that version of the Bible, but then the Catholics just like kind of added some in. Yeah.
That's good because I went to Peru one time. I think it was last year, And I mean, so I told my one friend to come with me.
Okay.
And he's Roman Catholic.
Okay.
And he couldn't make it, so I just went. And I'm I'm almost glad he didn't go because they played a video which I thought was, I mean, even if it's true, I thought it was kind of harmful. They're basically like, it's this documentary, and they're basically saying how the Catholic belief isn't, biblically based. Okay, and I could see how the argument may be true, but I mean, I think that was God that told him that he couldn't come because yeah, I think there definitely would have been some religious tension between the both of us. So yeah, I would just say that was very interesting. So I'm glad that Young Life wasn't that direct, I would say, in that sort of way.
Yeah, that's kind of, I'm not too familiar with Crew. Like, I've seen it before and stuff, and I don't even think I've been at all, but I'm really surprised that they would show something like that.
And it was just a one-time thing almost, because it never came up the whole year, after that. At least when I was there. I didn't go as much later in the semester, but yeah, so I thought that was interesting.
That is interesting. Nothing against Crew, because maybe that was just I don't know, one person who wanted to show it.
It was someone else's idea that's kind of the outs. I mean, he does Crew, but it's outside of Eastern. So it's kind of his idea to play it.
It just almost seems pushy in a way, because it's who is that for? Is that for the Catholics who decided to show up and wanting to be oh, that your beliefs are wrong, or is it for you guys so that you can go be oh, your beliefs are wrong?
That's why I thought it was more to solidify that aspect, but yeah, it definitely catered, I think, to one branch more so than the other. So yeah,
I could see the value in it, I guess, if they were trying to, I guess in case anyone was on the verge and they were oh, I don't know, Catholicism over there, maybe I want to go there, and they're just trying to swipe people away and be well, maybe not, maybe you want to reconsider. Here's some, maybe there were facts, I don't know exactly what the video entailed.
Exactly,
sure,
but it was something like that. So yeah, well, thank you for coming, Mary.
Yes,
I appreciate
this was
you
fun.
having this discussion, and yeah, I appreciate it.
Sure.